As we've been looking in maps within Star Wars Battlefront, I've mainly looked at some of the bigger locations. Levels that demonstrate Battlefront push to the max, with all manner of vehicles, flight, large crowds of infantry, and wide open areas. But that is not the only type of map Battlefront offers. While it is often the bigger, spectacular arenas that stick in our memory, Battlefront's formula works on the small scale just as well as the large. A common location for shooter games looking to create smaller maps is a city. Urban warfare is defined by its faster-paced, close-quarters combat. There's also something a bit haunting about the idea of a war zone in a place where people live. It's an idea we don't think about much. A home, a neighborhood, is supposed to be a place of safety and rest. But the reality for many different people throughout history is that wars come to your homes, your cities. It's an idea Star Wars has explored many different times in many different ways. The most iconic of which being Naboo in The Phantom Menace, where the Trade Federation attempts to blockade and invade. The climax of the film sees several different battles take place across the planet, one of which is an attempt to retake the capital city of Theed, led by Queen Amidala and her security force. Thus, a battle breaks out in the streets before moving inside to the palace. As the primary setting of Episode 1, Battlefront was sure to include Naboo. Matter of fact, it got two maps. One, the ever-iconic Naboo Plains, which we will cover in a separate video, and today's topic, Naboo Theed. It's a map I think many people remember, but it's not nearly a fan favorite like some of the other levels in this game are. However, this map was shown off in a lot of the early promotional material for the game. We've looked at so many large-scale maps, I wanted to slow down and focus on a smaller one. I also don't want to burn through all the really beloved maps first, otherwise we're going to have nothing to look forward to. And also, kinda just wanted to make a quicker video, possibly get it out sooner. As always, I'll be playing through this map offline on hard and medium difficulty, on both the original Xbox release and the Classic Collection versions of this game. I've stated my reasons why in past videos. And speaking of, if this is your first time watching one of my videos, I've already analyzed several other maps in this game, and I do plan to cover them all eventually. If you enjoy it, I'll link a playlist with every video in the description below. Theed has a very simple design. The map shows off a small portion of the city in front of the royal palace. A handful of roads, walking paths, and hallways create the battleground. The map consists of 6 command posts laid out in a roughly symmetrical pattern. The top row of 3 are the plaza, the rotunda, and the embassy. Below them are the office, palace, and guard. Each side starts off with one set of these 3 command posts. The clones and the Empire share the set of bottom posts, so I will call them Team 1. The droids and the rebels start with the upper line, so they will be Team 2. In fact, let's actually start talking about Team 2, the theoretical aggressors, if the location of the palace is anything to go off of. At the north end of the level sits the Rotunda. Living up to its name, it is a large circular area sitting in the middle of a river, which also runs through the upper portion of the map, creating a natural barrier. The Rotunda is a beautiful locale, highlighting the architecture of Naboo. A large open-air dome is supported by numerous pillars. The floor is tiled with warm blues and beiges. The actual command post sits at the very back of the structure. To leave, units must cross one of 3 bridges, each jutting out towards the mainland and towards a different command post. The center path leads straight towards the palace and the courtyard which sits before it. The left and right options lead to Team 2's secondary posts, the embassy and the plaza. These 2 locations are fairly similar. The embassy is a large open area with a fountain in its center. At its front is an archway, which you will pass through if you're coming from the rotunda. The back end leads down a street towards Team 1's guard post. The command post itself is just to the east of the fountain, along the sides of the buildings. On the other end, the plaza is much the same, down to the archway and fountain. What differs, however, is the command post placement. This time, the post is on top of a nearby balcony, which requires you to climb a set of stairs. It's not the only post with this feature, but we'll come back to that. Both areas are guarded by a handful of gun turrets, commonly found across this map. A single tank will spawn at each location as well, providing some much-needed armor for the upcoming battle. Though slightly different in layout, they serve the same purpose: a forward staging ground to attack the enemy's base. Team 1's layout mirrors Team 2's, with one central point flanked by two supporting command posts. Following the paths at the embassy and the plaza, you come across the guard and the office, respectively. The guard sits in an interesting location, slightly tucked away in this little alcove. Whereas the plaza had stairways leading up to a single balcony, guard sits between two balconies, meaning units who spawn here have access to two high ground sniping positions, but it also means the enemy can quickly get into this area if one of these positions is unguarded. And, keeping with this balcony theme, there is the office, which also sits on an elevated platform. Both the guard and the office sit very close to Team 1's central command post, and the focal point of much of the battle. Despite being called the Palace, this area is a large open courtyard before the gates leading to the Queen's estate. The actual post sits at the back of this arena, right by the palace entrance. Flanking it is where Team 1's vehicles spawn. Two tanks on either side of this back area, giving them ease of access to either the large arena before them, or the roads leading towards the command posts next to them. As can be inferred from the layout, this map funnels everything into the palace area. Every path leads to this central location. It is the heart of Theed, and much like a heart, a great deal of blood passes through this courtyard. The first wave will hit from the rotunda, having the straightest shot at the area. Perhaps they'll be augmented by a tank from one of the periphery bases, but generally this first force won't make too much progress, since like I said, the command post sits at the far end of the lane. The best shot Team 2 has at taking this point is by coming at it from the sides. But of course, there is another command post guarding both of these openings. While I would not necessarily call Theed an attacker-defender map like some we've looked at so far, Team 2 tends to be more offensive, whereas Team 1 has better defenses. This is the basic ebb and flow of the battle. Team 2 attacks the lower command post, Team 1 fights back. It's a very simple map, at least compared to some of the ones we've seen so far. But things become more complicated once you get into the nitty-gritty of each section. One of the most critical command posts to hold is actually the office. Unlike the guard, which is tucked between buildings, the office has a short and straight path to the palace's post. Not only this, but being set up on a balcony provides protection from anyone looking to steal it, as they need to climb a narrow set of stairs and then hold control over a small platform. These confines make the fighting here a coin toss. You don't have much room to maneuver, but neither does your opponent. It's fairly easy to hit your target, but so can your opponent easily hit you. It's a fast engagement, whoever wins out. And of course, in trying to take the point, you have to deal with spawning enemies. But while some will deploy up top with you, most will spawn at ground level. And once the post is yours, you have a phenomenal sniper vantage as well, both towards the palace and towards the plaza. It's the post you want to have, as it provides an easy access point to either defend or attack from. And if you choose to push farther down the road, the plaza has virtually all the same advantages and disadvantages, save its proximity to the palace. I find it interesting how both command posts on the left side of the map are on raised platforms, whereas those on the right are both on even ground. It gives the two halves of the map a completely different feel while still falling into the same rough outline of a level. On the opposite side of the city, the guard also provides high ground. As stated before, there are two balcony areas here, one of which gives an immediate view of the entire palace arena, opening up more targets at the cost of being slightly closer to the danger. The embassy is the most plain command post, in a manner of speaking. There's just not much to it, no elevation, no tricky angles, but a simpler post is not a bad thing, especially when seemingly every other command post here feels like it has some sort of minor gimmick to it. What it is good for, however, is access to Theed's main road. This semicircle is a sort of in-between point. A bit of fighting will occur on it, but it's mainly just a path that AI units and tanks will travel to get to the real combat. So, yeah, it's literally just a road. What's more interesting is this area running alongside it. Covered walkways line the outskirts of these buildings, connecting the outside Team 2 post to, once again, the Palace area. Yet another route to ruin. It is common to see enemies pouring out of these walkways in an effort to fight for the Palace. But the most interesting part of these walkways are these stairs which lead to yet another upper area. A length of deck runs along the buildings, providing, yet again, a great position to shoot from. And both sides end in another terrace which overlooks, you guessed it, the Palace. If it hasn't been made abundantly clear, verticality plays a key role on this map. While the streets are flat and level as would be expected, there are so many overhangs and outlooks that it doesn't play like a standard quote-unquote flat map. A good sharpshooter will reign supreme, which is what you would expect in an urban setting. I think hands down the marksman class is the way to go if you're looking for kills. But you can't talk about Battlefront verticality without talking about the jetpack users. The Jet Trooper and Dark Trooper can obviously get to areas other units can't. There are several random platforms around, though not many can be viable for attack. The Jet Trooper has more control over his flight, and can make the most of it. But even the Dark Trooper can quickly escape to a higher ledge. Now, I've mentioned the Palace and how dangerous it is several times, but I feel like I haven't said much more beyond that. But to be honest, there isn't too much more to tell. Battles play out how you would expect, units on both sides pouring in from every angle. Maybe a lucky soldier will make it to the back command post, only to be met with respawning enemies. It's very straightforward. But there are a few minor things of note. For one, due to where they spawn, the enemy team could easily steal one of the tanks by the post, especially if they're coming from the office side. But to be honest, tanks don't last too long here. The Palace area is certainly wide, but still narrow enough that armor can reliably be targeted. And there are a handful of the aforementioned turrets around the perimeter. I've mentioned in past videos how I don't usually pay these much mind, but here they offer invaluable support and deadly efficiency, mowing down infantry and melting through tank hulls. Everything here is fast-paced. The only relief is found behind the pillars or the handful of flower beds which can provide decent cover in a pinch, but only until an enemy gets a new angle on you. Now, contrasting the busy and dangerous Palace is the rotunda. If every road leads towards the Palace, then they all lead away from the rotunda. This is the post that sees the least amount of action, at least during my playthroughs of this map. Still, paths work two ways, but very few units actually go into this area, and those who do typically get caught on the bridges heading to the island, which all three serve as natural bottlenecks. Even when I did try taking this command post for myself, I found myself constantly being called unawares. The room is so big it can take a moment to truly get a lock on an opponent, and by the time you do, they've likely already started shooting. Or perhaps they'll sneak up on you. Between the pillars and potted plants, there's a surprising amount of cover that allows the enemy to remain hidden until it's too late. It tended to be the last command post remaining, which does make sense when you remember everyone tends to go in the opposite direction. Plus, the island it sits on is, in fact, an island. There are natural borders. A lake, or at least some sort of reservoir, makes up the upper boundary of Theed. It creates a moat around the rotunda. Next to the bridges leading to the structure, there's another small set of stairs which lead down to a dock-like area. The platform is submerged, but is still more than shallow enough to allow you to stand on. Good thing, too, as if you fall into the water too deep for you to stand in, you will immediately drown. This is different in the Battlefront 2 version of this map, which we will briefly talk about later. This time, you don't drown instantly, but rather start losing health over time. You can jump to get your head above water, buying you some time though. However, the platforms are too high to jump back on. But there is another way in and out of the water. I noticed on the far sides of the map there were ramps leading down into the lake. So a thought came to mind. What if I tried taking a tank down there? So I brought one, not really expecting much, only to discover that it floated on the water. This opened up a whole new aspect of this map I never considered before. Now the river became my own personal canal, a new pathway which allowed for new tactics. Virtually the entire body of water is open to you, so you can cross to the other side's ramp, allowing you to safely transport a tank at full health to assault the opposite command post. Or you could pull up to one of those docks, hop out, and flank the enemy as they come across the bridge. And then there's my favorite newfound strategy, taking a jetpack unit, driving to the back of the rotunda, exiting the tank which sits me on top of it, and then flying in to capture it from behind. While definitely situational uses, these new tactics add yet another element to the combat of the city. And speaking of the city, I haven't really talked about what this map is in universe yet because, well, it's so obviously the entrance to the royal palace. The guard is the guardhouse, the embassy and the office are workspaces for the politicians. The rotunda and plaza are likely areas meant for relaxation for the queen and her workforce. This is also the first map I've covered that returns in Battlefront 2's base game. No Xbox Live patch required. There are several maps this is the case for, and while I do plan to cover Battlefront 2 after finishing the first game, I'm not yet sure how I'll cover the maps featured in both. But I do want to take the time to talk about Theed's appearance in this game. Because while the map is virtually unchanged, the minor things that were tweaked alter the way these battles play out. The first thing you may notice is that the map displayed has been flipped upside down. Now the palace is to the north, while the rotunda is in the south. This doesn't affect the actual map, just how the map is displayed. What does change is the command post. Instead of being split horizontally, the map is divided roughly vertically, with Team 1 roughly getting the left-hand side, which includes the embassy, guard, and palace, while the office, plaza, and rotunda belong to the enemy. This does change the dynamic of battle, because while the palace is still the hottest zone, each team approaches it from different starting positions, including the ever-important office. But that's not the only changes to the command post, because for a few of them, their physical location has shifted as well. Now the palace post is not at the back of the courtyard, but rather at its front. This means that the office is no longer the advantage it once was, but it also means it takes less time for the enemy from other locations to start capturing the post. This makes it even more transitory than it was before. And now tanks from the main road can more easily ruin your day if you're trying to take it. The Rotunda 2 has seen a similar shift. Whereas before, the post was located on the far side of the structure, it is now front and center. These shifts in location mean you can start capturing the area earlier, making for an easier time. It may seem minor, but it removes the somewhat stronghold status of these posts before. Other than that though, the map stays virtually the same, save one major difference you've probably picked up on from the footage. Which leads me into the trivia and interesting points about this map. Starting with the fact that, yes, the time of day changes between the two games. It is nighttime on Battlefront 2, whereas the first game is set during the day. However, when looking at the skybox, it has a more sunset look to it, with deeper purples contrasting lighter yellows. The Battlefront wiki made a point of pointing out that you can safely capture the embassy command post from inside this fountain. While this is true, as lying down makes you nearly untouchable, It doesn't account for the fact that you cannot touch your enemies either. You'll have to expose yourself to clear the area and finish the capture, and the waterspout can obscure your vision at some angles. Feed is also the second level of the Clone Wars campaign. It's one of the few times that unique modifiers are used in BF1. The level is meant to recreate the recapture of Theed from the Phantom Menace. Because of this, a unique faction is used in place of the clones. The Naboo Royal Guard are a unique local faction because they don't appear in any other version of Theed, just the campaign level. They were planned to support the clones in instant action, but this idea was scrapped. They come with almost all the same base classes as the primary factions: a guard, a vanguard, a pilot, sniper, and officer. The droids, too, have access to a special unit. Since super battle droids were not yet developed, the standard infantry is swapped out for a basic B-1 battle droid, with a blaster and grenades instead of the wrist cannons and rockets of its beefier brother. Despite the Royal Guards being the local faction in Battlefront 1, Gungans are playable on this map in Battlefront 2. Hunt mode allows you to play as locals, and for Theed, you get Gungans versus super battle droids. While not armed with guns, they do get plenty of grenades, and a fusion cutter, so they can fight back with boomers or by fixing the gun turrets nearby. And finally, another Battlefront 2 fact, but a very infamous glitch is found on Theed. If you come to this corner between the guard and the palace, you will typically find several soldiers bunched up, some seemingly trying to run into the walls. It's a bit spooky if you weren't prepared to find it, but this likely suggests that the BF2 version of Theed was going to be expanded. Perhaps a hallway or a route into the palace itself was planned to go here at one time, but was scrapped. However, the AI pathfinding still tries to bring soldiers through this ghost route. Certain maps within the Battlefront series have earned a legendary reputation due to some unique aspect about them, or some iconic fighting style. Naboo Theed is not one of those maps. I don't think there's too many folks who dislike it, but it's never one you hear brought up as a contender for the best map in the series. But it doesn't have to be. You don't have to do something special and unique to just be a good map. Theed is simple and complex at the same time. It's fairly symmetrical, but it's also asymmetrical enough where it doesn't feel repetitive. It mixes flat streets with high ground vantage points. It mixes wide areas with narrow turns. Open arenas with just enough cover and pillars to duck behind and stay alive. It's a map full of minor contrasting elements that comes together in just the right way. I mentioned urban warfare at the start of this video, and that is the feeling Theed captures. It can be fast-paced, it requires quick thinking and making use of the environment, and it rewards those clever enough to get the first shot and those who can lock down a choke point. It's not overly complex, being the perfect small to medium-sized map that it needs to be. However, it still leaves the door open enough for outside-the-box thinking with stray ledges and a deceptively useful waterway. Theed is an unsung testament to Battlefront's map design. While, yes, some other planets may be flashier or more complex, even a simple level shines with the map design put into Star Wars Battlefront 2. As always, thank you so much for sticking around and watching this video. As you can probably tell, I have a newfound appreciation for this map. And that's what I like about this series, getting to go back to a game that I am so familiar with and looking at it with a brand new set of eyes, a new perspective. And like I said before, I have looked at other maps in this game. Maybe one of your favorites. I'll link that playlist below if you want to go check it out if you haven't seen it already, or, I don't know, maybe you have seen it and you just want to rewatch one of those videos. And this is actually not the only Battlefront content I have going right now. I recently started replaying Battlefront 2's Rise of the Empire campaign. And for those of y'all who don't know, most of the time on the channel I just play through games and record it in a more fast-paced and funny format. So, if you want to see me do that with Rise of the Empire, I'll also link the first video to that in the description below. But what's one of your favorite Star Wars Battlefront maps? And are there any other smaller, slightly more obscure Battlefront maps that don't always get the recognition you think they deserve to? Leave a comment telling me which ones you think that is. I'll be looking at them all soon enough. So in the meantime, thank you so much once again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.